Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson, a World Alternative Media here, and of course we're joined by author and economic analyst here at WAM, John Sneisen. And I always find that the elite always come under the guise of convenience and helping one another. It always works out for government to say, we're going to give you free things, blah, 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 blah. But then when it really comes down to it, when people really have to deal with the consequences, that's when it kind of clicks in their head. Oh, we've made a grave error in our judgment in, for example, electing Macron. There's a big story that's coming out of France right now, and it's just another example of collectivism, peak statism, and what happens at the end of the bread and circuses. And this article from USA Today says, anger over rising fuel taxes sparks fiery French protests. And these protests have been going on for quite some time now, and people have been run over by cars. It's become super deadly, very dangerous, crazy stuff happening. There's no go zones. And as this article says, French police fired tear gas and water cannons to disperse violent demonstrators in Paris on Saturday as thousands gathered in the capital and beyond and staged road blockades to vent anger against rising fuel taxes. Thousands of police were deployed nationwide to contain the eighth day of deadly demonstrations that started as protests against tax, but morphed into a rebuke of President Emmanuel Macron and the perceived elitism of France's ruling class. 2 people have been killed since November 17th in protest-related tragedies. Tense clashes on the Champs-Élysées on Saturday saw police face off with demonstrators who burned plywood, wielded placards reading "Death to Taxes," and upturned a large vehicle. At least 20 people, including 4 police officers, were injured in the day of unrest in Paris, according to police. One person sustained a serious hand injury. Police said that dozens of protesters were detained for throwing projectiles, among other acts. In the Place de Madeleine, scooters were burned to blackened shells. And I quote, "It's going to trigger a civil war. And me, like most other citizens, we're all ready," said Benjamin Vrignaud, 21-year-old protester from Chartres. "They take everything from us. They steal everything from us," said 21-year-old Laura Cordonnier. The famed avenue is speckled with plumes of smoke and neon owing to the color of the vests the self-styled Yellow Jacket protesters don. French drivers are required to keep neon security vests in their vehicles. Authorities said that 5,000 protesters flooded the Champs-Élysées at the demonstration's peak. There were nearly 81,000 protesters nationwide. Now, breaking out of this for a moment, I do want to say that, okay, I know I'm from French Canada. I can't really pronounce some of these words properly. But notice how they're talking about their money is being stolen from them. It's interesting that, what was it, last year that they had their big election where they were hailing this notion of elitist socialism, and then, oh no, now they're stealing all of our money and we can't afford to go to work to make money for our family where half of our income gets taken away anyway. And, now we're in poverty and, inflation and blah, blah. Every single angle is hitting them and they're like, oh, wait. Using force against others to steal their money for things that I never asked for that are wholly inefficient compared to the market don't work out quite that well. And Interior Minister Christophe Castaner denounced protesters from the far right, whom he called rebellious, as he accused National Assembly leader Marine Le Pen of encouraging them. But the Interior Ministry played down the scale of Saturday's demonstrations by highlighting that up to 244,000 people took part in last Saturday's protests. Authorities noted that no banks or boutique windows were targeted, unlike the violent May Day demonstrations earlier this year. And I'll just say that might be one of the problems there. But anyway, I'm not going to go there. John, what do you think about what's happening in France right now? Because this seems like we're really seeing the backlash of complete collectivist control.
Well, it's the problem is, Josh, it's mass accumulation of taxes and inflation. That's the number 2 things that you're seeing there. And what happened during the French Revolution, Josh? It was the destruction of the assignat, the livre, as they call it in France. And of course, that's what you've seen. You've seen kind of a second revolution here now that's starting to partake. People are saying that they're willing to actually go into a civil war in order to stop the government from extorting them. I think there might be some wrong points here on why they're revolting. They might not understand that it is because of taxation and inflation. They're getting double hit by that on both sides. Meanwhile, their wage growth, I'll show you two charts here, Josh. Here's the wage growth in France, for example, and you can see it's just hovering around, depending on when it is, it's hovering around 0.4 to 0.7%. Meanwhile, you get the inflation here, and you can see the inflation has been ramping up over that same time. So over the last 2-3 years, the inflation has been more than the actual wage increase. So that puts initial strain onto the working populace. That I was listening to RT. This was from the last weekend, where they were interviewing people, and they're saying like, yeah, I don't have any money anymore to pay for my gas to get around. And people are blaming, of course, like the gas taxes and all, and that has something to do with it. But it's, of course, the secondary, which is hidden tax, which is inflation, that is hugely, the biggest problem here in France. And of course, Macron. We all know where he comes from. I go and look at my LinkedIn profile here and search him up. And he's on my third level of connections. That's very unfortunate that I'm actually even connected to him on that level. It really sucks because he's a corporate hack, and I think he was trained by. Look at his career here, 2008 to 2012. He was working for Rothschild and company, Josh.
Yeah. Now, John, I wanted to mention something. It's funny because we didn't see these kinds of protests in places like Canada to the same extent when the fuel tax was implemented. I want to mention something that I find kind of interesting is that during the election, of course, we saw the Paris Climate Agreement deal happening. We saw, Macron as a big supporter of the Paris Climate Agreement and this push towards Agenda 2030, which really it's the government, the biggest polluter in the world. Really, it by far, government is the biggest polluter in the world, saying that by stealing people's money and regulating small businesses out of competition and propping up major monopolies, that's how they'll stop pollution, while they continue to drop, chemicals on children overseas in the Middle East, and while they continue to dump toxic waste in the oceans. I mean, absolutely insane. And just one paragraph from this article says, Macron has so far held strong and insisted the fuel tax rises are a necessary pain to reduce France's dependence on fossil fuels and fund renewable energy investments, a cornerstone of his reforms of the nation. He will demand fresh plans to make the energy transition easier next week. Yeah, just next week, I'll make it a lot easier, guys. I swear, trust me. We're going to make it a lot easier. We're just going to steal your money in a more sneaky way and, make you still feel the pain. But it'll be a month further down the road, so you don't feel it necessarily right now, and everyone lives happily ever after in complete debt, servitude, and poverty. I mean, this is insane, John.
Well, yeah, Josh, what is happening also, this is not just France, of course, that have a huge push against oil. What you're seeing is, they call it an oversupply of oil. It's really the economy is super slowing down as well. On top of that, where you had just recently, oil prices have dropped tremendously. Like the West Syncrude Canada, which is the oil sands oil, is at about $10 US a barrel, which is completely insane. It trades about 80% lower than most of the other oil in the world. That is really insane. But that's Trudeau, of course. He bought up the Kinder Morgan pipeline, and then of course now they have the Keystone XL got shut down, the building of that. So there's nowhere to really transport that oil, and I think it's deliberate. Notley, of course, are in charge there, the NDP lady, of course, over there, and she has, while there was a huge drop in oil prices a couple of years ago, she actually doubled down and started to tax them harder, implementing carbon cap and trade stuff. all of this just, kicking the economy while it's down. It's just purposefully done so they could destroy the economy. It's like, oh yeah, the economy is not sustainable. Meanwhile, it was them that actually pushed forward policies and regulation that destroys the economy. It's insane, Josh. And I just want to make a point of the actual gasoline price in France and the taxes. Now, I looked up the numbers, and it's about 0.74 euros in taxes on the gasoline. It's approximately, and that is about half, almost 50% of the price. So think about if you actually took away the taxation from this, people would suddenly be able to afford double the amount of gasoline suddenly, and to be able to actually move forward in the economy instead of getting impeded by this constant push against people's ability to transport themselves and to do economic activity, because it's really slowing it down and it's destroying the economy here. That's what we're seeing in France. And of course, not to mention, the crazies there, I think it's about 75% higher income bracket. I think it's about 300,000 euros, income tax that they implemented. 75%. You're taking away, you only sit 25% of your hard-earned labor, and then they say, well, the rich, they have to pay more. No, they should pay the exact same amount as everybody else because they're contributing, but they're actually contributing more to society. But they could just pay, the same amount of taxes. That should be totally fine. But no, if you're richer and you produce more, you have to pay more to society. It totally impedes and stalls and stops economic activity that way. It's just a socialist belief that we can tax more and get more. It's just the problem is they're growing the government in itself very rapidly here in France, and it's just engulfing and destroying the economy. It's not very good what you're seeing. Well,
I mean, it's the same thing that I saw a recent meme. I don't know if I'll be able to pull it up, but I mean, it was talking about, say you get taxed on your income like 50%. So you lose half of your money. Say in one day you worked hard to make like $200 and you end up with $100 after the check for that day. And then you go out on your way to work to fill up your tank with gas, and then you've just paid, say, that entire $100 to pay for gas. Say you have a truck or something, and with the fuel tax, you've also given half of that money to the government. So therefore, you've made
plus the
out of
$200.
Out of $200, you've got like $50. I mean, it's so insane, John.
And right, because you're on food and everything.
Of course, and
70-80%.
Yeah, and I mean, this is what it comes down to, though. It's the government always seems to be spending 99% of its time trying to fix problems they created in the first place. And then you have the backlash, and people still want more government. I mean, it's just religious indoctrination, propagandation, this notion that we need to depend on the state to, live. It's so absurd. The human being is free intrinsically. The only thing that can step in that way is a government. The government can't give you freedom. It can only take it away. And taxation is theft. Taxation is extortion. And it's about time the people of France remembered this, because there's a time when the people of France knew that taxation was theft. And then they gave themselves, buckled over, got on their knees, and bowed to the almighty authority called government collectivism, this complete organized crime racket that preys on the populace's debt and servitude and dependence. And this is something that we're seeing in every country in the world, some at different levels than the others, but nonetheless, it's all happening to everyone, no matter what country you are in the world. And some people will say, well, this government or that government's worse. Okay, yeah, so let's say that person's cancer is worse than your cancer, so you shouldn't do anything about your cancer because that other person's cancer is worse? I mean, just think about the mental gymnastics involved, folks. We need to stand up against this insanity. And I'm sorry, but to be completely honest as well, with the protesters that are on the ground in France, what are you trying to achieve at the same time? Are you asking for the government to stop this, or are you going to stand up and make sure that the government stops this? Because I find too often protesting is asking the government to fix the problem of government instead of looking to yourselves and standing up and revolting against this massive entity of the ship of state. The same government, by the way, which worked with Facebook to filter out news that was counter to certain viewpoints in the establishment. The same country which blocked at one point the channel We Are Change from the country for, you know, whatever speech, controversy, whatever. It's just this insane idea that government is God. And government is not God. Government will suck the life out of you, and the more you ask for to solve the problems of government, the less life you will simply be able to lead. You will slowly get weaker in the knees. They will suck more and more life out of you. Every bit of ambition and, you know, striving for success, it'll be ripped right away from you, because you'll have to settle for a terrible wage job, bow down to the state because you cannot afford to actually live out your dreams. You've been pushed into this system of complete corporate fascism, corporatism, if you will, and this idea that the government can rule your life and tell you what you can and cannot do, push you into debt servitude because they say it's for the greater good of the greater number, which it is not, folks. It is not for the greater good. It's for, you know, the government to be able to grow and get bigger and rule over you further and more and control every aspect of your life. Break free, folks. Decentralize yourselves. Rule yourselves. There's always ways to break free. There are many solutions, everything from just self-sustainability, independence. Responsibility is a hallmark of freedom itself. Of course, you cannot have one without the other. And of course, you know, food, water, shelter, self-defense. You're not gathering things for the toughest guy on the block. Gold and silver as wealth insurance. And of course, you got to also look at things like cryptocurrencies that are truly decentralized with fundamental value. Do your own due diligence. This is our opinion, not investment advice, but it's an idea. It's just one of many, many, many ways to be able to break free from this system. It takes steps, it takes education, it takes understanding that the very notion of statism, the very notion of government is to steal your money to, fund inefficient things that they claim you need, and do a bad job of it so they can come back with no incentive to compete on the market to do the same thing again in a most inefficient way, and make sure that you're on your knees dependent to them all the time, always encroaching further and further into your individual liberties as time goes on. It's just a massive trap. It's an organized crime racket, and you need to break free. John, what's your bottom line?
Well, the bottom line here, Josh, is that the government is way too big to survive in France, and the people are kind of feeling the dangers of having a big government. Is you get poorer and poorer and poorer over time as they print money. That creates inflation, and then of course there's more and more taxes always that they put in place. So you got to understand that. When the government gets above what I say, about 50% of the economy, like France has 56.5% of the economy is government of the total economy. That is a dangerous spot to be in. And this is numbers from 2017. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see where we're at today. But you got to understand that France, they tried to do this austerity. You know, it's like the government giving you something and then trying to take it away. So you feel want to become more dependent on the government in the first place. So this is just a dangerous place to be in, being dependent on government. Try to get away from that. Try to be more self-reliant and not, ever like, I would never want to get anything from the government other than, of course, my theft back when they steal it from me in the first place in a tax credit. Yeah. I'm just done with, big government. And
John, if they steal your money, then they can spend it on paying off the interest on the debt, which is created at the printing of fiat currencies, and at the same time, they can pay for bombing little kids overseas. Don't you think that's worth it for you to have half of your paycheck stolen? I mean, this is the insanity, John. It's that the vast majority of this theft goes towards horrible, horrible, horrible things. I don't think people realize how small of an amount of their money that gets stolen from them goes towards the infrastructures that they seem to support this money being stolen for.
France is like bombing people all across, Northern Africa. That's their former colonies, Josh. They're all over there,
Don't forget Vietnam.
Yeah, of course. No, they're all over the place. They're with NATO, of course. They were the European Union trying to now. Yeah, they're talking about creating a banking union now in Europe to solidify, so everybody becomes a part of the whole banking system in Europe. So you don't have any independent states anymore. It's just one massive, region. And that's what they want. That's what they want to build us into. And Macron and Merkel is, one of the two heads that are pushing this forward and wanting this massive globalist, one world type of government system.
Absolutely, and it's all different flavors of collectivism, whether it's fascism or communism, progressivism, liberalism, conservatism, nationalism. All of these ideas all come together into this notion that we need to depend on government for our own ability to live freely, which is an oxymoron. You as an individual live freely without forcing your ideas or other people forcing their ideas on you, the majority enforcing its will on the minority. Folks, break free. It's immoral. It's illogical. It's so easy to debunk. So anyway, just watch our videos. We do this all the time. We talk about it all the time.
Are you saying that I'm free, Josh? I'm free?
Yeah, I identify, under their hate speech laws, I identify as free of government. Does that work? Or are they discriminating against me otherwise by stealing my money?
Hate speech, Josh. You're going to get put in the Facebook gulag.
Just watch exactly. Yeah, better watch out. Anyway, thanks for watching, everyone. Make sure to check us out on BitTube. We are now on BitTube at World Alternative Media. Make sure to find us there. Anyway, that's where our more controversial stuff that isn't fit for YouTube will go in the future. But anyway, thanks for going into this with us, John. And until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson and John Sneisen signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change. Like what you see here, OM? Don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we are so vastly demonetized and censored on YouTube, as these guys come in and flag all of our content as hate speech. Also, check out our Bitcoin address below as well as on the screen for you to scan if you please. And also check us out at steemit.com. We're at Josh Sigurdson. It's a future of social media where you get paid in the upvote of your post in cryptocurrency. Steem, that is. So make sure to check us out there. Make sure to join us at Anarchapulco 2019 with people like Ron Paul, G. Edward Griffin, of course, Jeff Berwick, Vid Jedlicka. So many incredible speakers are going to be speaking. It's just a massively growing event. It is something you have to see to believe. So make sure to check it out below and save money on your tickets by using promo code WAM, that's WAM, and I hope to see you there. Also, check out our newsletter as we are getting demonetized and censored and all that. We don't know what comes next, so we have an email, worldalternativemedia@gmail.com. Send us an email with subject line YES, YES, and we will include you in the newsletter where we will continuously keep you updated. So until next time, thanks for watching, everyone. This is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
I'm sure you have already changed people's minds in your young age because you're involved, and I like that.